Did Prince Andrew's father have an affair with Sarah Ferguson's mother? Why was Prince Andrew ordered off HMS Broadsword? Did the Argentines plot to kill Prince Andrew on the island of Mystique? And what is the truth about Jeffrey Epstein and Fergie? Hello and welcome to a very special episode of Palace Confidential, where I'm joined by the esteemed royal biographer Andrew Lownie, whose 2015 book Stalin's Englishmen, The Lives of Guy Burgess was named Book of the Year by The Guardian, Best Biography of the Year by The Times and Biography of the Year by The Mail on Sunday. He's also written biographies on the Mountbattens and the Duke and Duchess of Windsor. He's here today to talk about his latest book, recently serialised in the Daily Mail, entitled The Rise and Fall of the House of York. Andrew, thank you for being here today. You're very welcome. Now, if you haven't already, yes, please do consider subscribing to the Daily Mail Royals channel. It's free and it will make sure you are up to date on all of our exclusive content. If you want the Palace Confidential newsletter to be sent directly to your inbox every Thursday, you can scan the QR code on your screen right now. So I feel like I have to ask this right away because we teased it at the beginning, but Prince Philip, the late Queen's husband, and Sarah Ferguson's mother, what happened there?
Well, they had an affair. The affair, I think, began in the 1960s. It continued. I mean, they certainly remained very close friends. He was actually staying with Susan Barante, as I understand, in November '92 when the fire at Windsor took place, which was, of course, his wedding anniversary. But I have it on pretty good authority that, they were lovers. It was well known in their circles. Wow.
Well, I'm sure a lot of people have very distinct opinions on Prince Andrew, especially after learning about his connections to the convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein, which we'll have more on that later. But let's go back to, you were talking about Gordonstoun. What was Andrew like as a young man? You've got new interviews in your book from people who knew him at school. What was he like?
Yeah, I interviewed about a dozen people who were at school with him, including friends of mine, and I'm afraid he was exactly the same. I mean, he was envious of people's wealth. There were very rich families there, like Niarchos family. He was arrogant, entitled, didn't feel the rules applied to him, naive, lazy. So I'm afraid child is father of the man. I mean, one of the things that they said was that this was an accident waiting to happen.
My gosh, it's like, in my experience of doing this job, people struggle to find somebody who has something good to say about Andrew.
I did struggle. I tried very hard because I like to have balanced books. I mean, there are people who said that he was effective as a special representative. You sometimes have to wonder if people are being rather sycophantic. And a lot of people who said nice things about him when he was, shall we say, was a special trade representative are now slightly reining back on that. But yeah, it is quite difficult. He was spoilt. I mean, he was spoilt by the Queen. He had no boundaries, and he was allowed to get away with it, and he has all through his life.
And do you think that this has something about the ring of it, like the problem of being the spare, as we saw in Prince Harry's book as well? Is it a case that Andrew's always been searching for some kind of identity? But in the case of Andrew, it's been expressed through pomposity and reportedly being a bully. His father, the Duke of Edinburgh, once described him as being a natural boss.
Yeah, I don't think he's a natural boss. In fact, it was one of his problems in the Navy that he didn't have leadership qualities. And I don't think the spare argument really holds. I mean, you see Prince Edward and Princess Anne finding a role for themselves, following public duty, and he could easily have done that. In fact, there were times when he was being pushed as the sort of the charismatic popular royal, and he dreamt at one point that he might be regent until William came to power, that Charles, because of his marital problems, would have to stand down. So, no, I think the thing, he is looking for identity, but he's really looking for, he wants to rely on status, because there's very little there to him. And so all he has is his position as a member of the royal family.
But why do you think, what's your opinion on why he is the one who comes across as spoilt, pompous, unpleasant, when you just said yourself, Edward and Charles don't read that way at all?
Well, it could be just the genes. That's one factor, and how they played out. It could be that as he was the favourite of the Queen, he was part of that second family. Edward always had a good relationship with Philip. The relationship with Philip and Andrew was a bit more complex, love-hate relationship. But the Queen, I think, felt sorry for him. I think she felt he was probably her most vulnerable child because of his naivety I think it's just sometimes character. It's very clear. I have lots of stories of his, pretty bullying behaviour really from a child. And I think it's just the way he is, I'm afraid.
Gosh, well, you talk about Andrew going on to be a naval officer. Of course, he famously served in the Falklands War in 1982, which we'll talk about more. But you've unearthed evidence that he cheated his way through Staff College.
Yes, I talked to a lot of his naval colleagues and have quite a lot in his naval career. I mean, he really was over-promoted. I mean, people didn't know what to do with him. He never really had accurate staff reports, things called 260s. And he was sent to Staff College basically to sort of didn't know what to do with him. So when he was there, he was very lazy. A friend of mine at Gordonson used to do his homework for him, and he hadn't done his paper to get through. And so he got, Neil Blair, his private secretary, got this high-flying Oxford graduate to take the paper for him. And he passed and got through, this officer has the thank you note from Andrew. At least he did that. That's
absolutely crazy. Do you think that Andrew thinks he's smart? Do you know what I mean? Do you think he thinks that actually he is where he is on merit, or it's just?
Yes, I think he does.
Yeah.
And, I mean, he will engage people. I mean, pilots, much more skilled pilots than him, on the technicalities of flying planes and things. He's so stupid he doesn't realise how stupid he is.
That's quite a line. Now, let's talk about this HMS Broadsword incident that you've reported on when he was ordered off.
Yeah, it's an interesting story. It came to me from a reliable source who served with him. And the story is that Andrew ordered a stoking party to go and do some work in between watches in the middle of the night. He didn't go out and supervise it himself, as he should have done. The chief stoker was so enraged by this that he actually went to Andrew's cabin and attacked him with a heavy metal instrument.
Wow.
And the whole thing was covered up. Now, I tried to research this. I actually got someone to talk to the first lieutenant of Broadsword. The claims were he never served on Broadsword. It couldn't have happened. So I'm just sort of put it there in the footnote in the hope that someone might come forward and fill out the story. Did it happen on another ship, or was he actually on Broadsword? I've contacted people through forums on Broadsword. No one has responded. Which is interesting. They've neither denied it or confirmed it. So it's one of those mysteries. But both of them were kicked off, basically.
Interesting. Well, we did mention the Falklands War. What have you uncovered about his service?
Well, I mean, there's lots of material in Navy forums that he didn't really serve and he was protected, and that's not true. I talked to Rafe Wick-Sneed, who was his commanding officer, very trustworthy source. Andrew and also two of the four members of his crew. And he went out on those Sea King operations, very dangerous work in the darkness. He did that, shift on, shift off, basically. And he did his job. I mean, and it shows that when he's given something a focus, he can actually rise to the occasion. So I don't think anyone can take away from what he did during the Falklands. People say he was just delivering mail and milk. But, he was involved in decoy for Exocets. He was doing search and rescue. He was doing anti-submarine search. So he had a pretty good war, I'd say.
But everything you've said up until that point had made me worry that I'd be nervous to serve with him, I think.
Well, there were people who were nervous of serving with him, partly because he was a target, but also he didn't always do all the work that was necessary. He wasn't as good a pilot as some of his colleagues, and people were nervous about that. But he had very good engineers dealing with him. He was given preferential treatment in fact that people who worked with him were vetted, and his helicopters were always a little bit better serviced than other people's.
Indeed. Well, let's move on to who you called the happiest divorced couple. Prince Andrew, Sarah Ferguson became engaged in 1986. They divorced 10 years later, but you believe that there were concerns about Fergie within the royal family from the beginning.
Yes, I mean, the Queen actually asked her, why did you marry, concerns about Andrew too. She asked, why did you marry Andrew? But they did their research. I mean, she'd been part of a pretty fast crowd when she was a chalet girl in Verbier. And there were rumours of drug use. Some of the people there actually had been convicted of drug use. And reports were prepared for the palace, reports, and basically people came in and they kind of dry cleaned her life before that. Her flatmate had all her pictures taken.
A lot easier to do back in the 80s, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But I mean, stuff has appeared, actually. There have been salacious pictures of Fergie appearing in foreign press, but nothing here.
Well, it seems that those concerns seem to be borne out by early marriage troubles between the pair, including alleged affairs.
Yes, I have to be careful for libel, but I mean, there are allegations that both of them had affairs pretty early in the marriage.
And you also revealed that at one point the palace wanted to brief that the Duchess was suffering a nervous breakdown.
Yeah, it's sort of what they did with Diana, and the Queen overruled this. I mean, the fact is that Diana, Fergie really had a nervous breakdown. She was behaving very strangely. I mean, she was running off with the children, going travelling and disappearing, and with her financial advisor, John Bryan. And so there were concerns, and she did check in to a practice in Paddington, and I think she's admitted publicly that she has had counselling for many years now.
And is that, again, was that deemed to be as the pressures of being in the royal family?
Well, I think one of the really strong elements in her childhood was her mother leaving the family to go off with an Argentinian polo player. And she says that sense of abandonment has shaped her life and forced her, for example, to take up eating too much and to have very low self-esteem and to want to please people. And I think that's true. But I think, yes, she was a sort of slightly out of water in the royal family. She didn't, Diana knew how to behave. Fergie was a breath of fresh air. Everyone loved that to start with, and then it was just a little bit too much of a breath of fresh air.
It's so interesting, isn't it, that we do, as the public, we embrace that new feeling in the royal family, but then it feels like they sort of like get battened into a pigeonhole. Yeah,
well, I mean, I think, there were worries that, she was taking too many holidays, that she was vulgar was the comment made by the Queen's private secretary, Lord Charteris, that she wasn't always doing as much as she could do in terms of public duties. So, she's a very charismatic, jovial character, larger-than-life character, but, she is very flawed, and I think people realise that she couldn't be controlled. And she had this great buddy in Diana, and the two of them kind of plotted their escape. They always used to watch The Great Escape was their favourite film.
That's fascinating. But then, of course, in 1992, what the Queen's Annus Horribilis, we had probably the peak Fergie moment in many people's minds, so-called togate, when she was photographed with American businessman, her advisor John Bryan, in the French Riviera. What have you uncovered about that?
Well, I managed to talk to some new people. In fact, I got through to Daniel Angeli, who was the photographer. And I think there's several things there. One is that it wasn't just one photographer, there were several. They were very, very close. The pictures are very close up. They were taken over several days. And this, of course, raises all sorts of questions about royal security. You had the two protection officers literally sitting there in the pool a dozen yards away from the photographer. They'd been warned that there were photographers in the area, and nothing seems to have been done. They'd been very open about this so-called secret getaway. There's stories about tip-offs in the palace and from Diana herself. But the fact is that, there were presumably informers at the airport and before who knew about it. And they just passed the word back. They'd hired two expensive cars. It was just, they weren't very good at disguising their affair. There were even rumours that John Bryan himself had leaked the story.
Yeah.
So it is a slight mystery of how the story got out, who leaked it. But, they were very foolish.
Well, it's interesting because what you were saying earlier about Fergie and Diana being conspirators, but then the Mail's Richard Kay said that Diana messaged him the night before the publication of those photos and sort of rather cryptically said the redhead's in trouble. Do we believe that she would have tipped off journalists?
Well, it's certainly a possibility. I mean, Fergie and her mother claimed publicly it was the palace. But certainly the relationship with Diana was a complex one.
Right.
I mean, it was Diana who actually introduced her to Andrew, in effect, brought her into the famous Ascot meeting where they at the profiterole, and the relationship took off. And they were great friends. The children of the same age, roughly. Diana would come across to Sunning Hill every weekend. They were going to leave the royal family at the same time. It was going to be a double whammy. And then Diana realised that she needed to distance herself from Fergie, that she was a bit of a liability. At one point, Charles said to Diana, "Why can't you be more like Fergie?" So,
in fact, that would have been amazing to see.
So, the things kind of changed. But I think Fergie then felt a bit betrayed because Diana then kind of let her kind of leave and to see what would happen. But Diana was jealous of Fergie's good relationship with the Queen, and Fergie was jealous of Diana's elegance and the fact that she was able to get away with things that Fergie couldn't.
Exactly, and do you think that Diana was possibly, with Togate, just thrilled that somebody else was the scandal focus for once? Or?
Well, there's a lot of that. We mustn't say Togate. John Bryan is very adamant that he was kissing her toes. So he's not quite so worried about what he was doing.
Sorry, John, it's Togate.
But yeah, there's a lot of briefing against they're like little rival courts.
Yeah.
And there's quite a lot of briefing between the courts to distract attention from their principal and put the attention on someone else. And so, certainly that was going on. They were all doing it. And so it's certainly a possibility. Something
I'm fascinated with is what was Andrew's relationship like with William and Harry?
Not good. It's
shocker.
It's interesting, and I mean the line is that when William comes to power, Andrew will be toast, and so he should do whatever deal he's going to do with Charles. I think Charles realises that. Charles is more forgiving, he's the sibling. I mean, that's again a difficult relationship, but William, I think, is a much more pragmatic and sort of independent, cold-hearted view. He sees as a liability to the monarchy, and Andrew has not always been very polite about Catherine. And of course, William is very protective of his wife. So, but they're two very different characters. I mean, I think he would be appalled if he knew exactly the full story, which I suspect he doesn't, of actually what Andrew's been up to. Right.
And Harry, do you think there's any sense of camaraderie, almost like a kindred spirit, like another sort of outsider?
Well, there are certain similarities. I mean, you made the point about the spare, this idea of going through life in some ways being demoted further down the pecking order. Neither of them are very bright. Both of them are pretty entitled. Both of them are weak men with strong wives, ambitious wives. So there are interesting parallels there. But I think Harry still doesn't have much time for him.
There are so many fascinating things in this book. There's something here, you note Fergie's propensity to become obsessed with individuals, from John Kennedy Jr. to Kevin Costner to Tiger Woods. What's your opinion behind this kind of compulsive emotional behaviour?
Well, I think it's back to the sense of abandonment. She's a woman who's looking for love. She didn't find it in her marriage, and she sought it in other relationships with other people who she felt could take care of her. That was John Bryan's role in many ways. She's often gone for much older father figures. I mean, her relationship with Paddy McNally, he was much, much older. She goes for much richer men who can take care of her. And I think she's drawn to glamour. She's drawn to stars. It's not a coincidence that all these people are well known and have glamour attached to them. So she's had a whole series of obsessions, and she will drop everything and do the most extraordinary things. Fly across the world, drive across Britain. She's had it with some of her financial mentors, the businessmen supporting her. She had it with an artist called Paul Gaisford. She switches, and she's quite mercurial, so she'll fall vehemently in love with someone and then she'll fall out. And it's the same with the way she treats her staff. One moment everyone's in and they're wonderful, the next minute they're being cold-shouldered and they don't know what they've done that's wrong.
Wow. Well, speaking of compulsive emotional behaviour, it's fair to say, before we talk about Jeffrey Epstein, that Prince Andrew was apparently a sex addict long before he came into Epstein's orbit.
Yes, I mean, he was called Randy Andy even at school, and I have stories of his sexual activities. He's clearly highly sexed. Various numbers have been quoted at me, ranging from 1,000 to 3,000 women that he slept with. And people talk about it. He was good looking. I mean, he was a prince, and women threw themselves at them. I mean, he was a notch on their bedpost, and he took advantage of that.
He must have thought he was a god.
Well, I think he did. Yeah. And I mean, you see, for example, that interview he did with Selena Scott, he's flirting with her openly. He could be, in his own way, very charming. He was very flirtatious, and a lot of women fell for that. He was very, very successful.
Well, and indeed, and you also revealed that he shared a lover with Epstein in Ghislaine Maxwell, but also a mistress with Bill Clinton. What?
Yes, that's a great story. It came to me from a member of staff in one of the British diplomats in New York. I think I know who the woman is. I can't say, but
okay.
But yeah, they and Clinton, of course, swam in the same circles. I mean, he was also involved with Epstein, also on the Lolita Express.
Yeah.
So they crossed over a lot, as he did with Trump.
And well, we should say, obviously, that Prince Andrew has always denied having sex with underage girls, including with Virginia Giuffre, who he paid a settlement to in 2022 without admitting liability. But it is unquestionable, is it not, that Epstein introduced young women to Prince Andrew?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I have a woman, Sarah, I talk about. Quite a lot of stuff was taken out for legal reasons, but I think there's absolutely no doubt that one of there were two prongs to the relationship with Epstein. One was Epstein gave him useful contacts, which is what he said in Newsnight, and vice versa. Useful contacts business-wise, but I think also Epstein and his modus operandi provided women, and of course then used it to blackmail people. And Andrew, I'm afraid, fell into that trap, in that honey trap. Not just with Epstein, but many other people as well. And
obviously it's very news sensitive at the moment, because it was through Epstein that Prince Andrew met President Donald Trump. Wasn't president then, but what was their relationship?
Well, I mean, the two things that they had in common, which they always talked about, was women and golf. So absolutely, they were very matey. And though Trump has denied it since and tried to distance himself, I mean, there's plenty of evidence of them meeting together, being photographed, and I've got plenty of testimony of people talking about their meetings. So there's no doubt. I mean, again, they were all swimming in the same pool.
I think probably the most shocking and frankly appalling revelation in your book is that Virginia Giuffre was selected or even ordered from a catalogue.
Yes, one of the things that was found when the FBI raided Epstein's home in Palm Beach were these basically photo books of girls. And that's been confirmed also by the Panorama program on Andrew. There were these girls there, and people basically ordered them up like a takeaway. Have it away, Dave.
What do you think? It's probably legally a difficult thing to talk about, but do you really think that Epstein was blackmailing Prince Andrew?
Virginia Giuffre has gone on the record saying that that's exactly what Epstein was doing. And Steve Hoffenberg, who was a business associate of Epstein, said that Andrew and Clinton were his two Super Bowl trophies. So he used both of them, and he had cameras everywhere. And why would he have cameras? Why would he be filming them if he wasn't going to use that? He was pretty ruthless.
Well, before we come to the infamous Newsnight interview in 2019, where Prince Andrew claimed he couldn't have had sex with a teenage girl in Ghislaine Maxwell's London townhouse because he was at home after attending a children's party at a Pizza Express in Woking. But you've spoken to witnesses who saw Andrew at the nightclub Trap with Virginia that night.
Yes, I haven't spoken to them myself. I've got this so it's second-hand from other people. Mm-hmm. But there's, I think, 3 different people who talk about seeing him there. I've also been in touch with the protection officer who says that he came back to Buckingham Palace that night. The government or the palace have refused to release the logs at Buckingham Palace, the security gate, which they should release under data protection rules to the protection officer. First of all, they said that they were part of national security, then they said they'd been destroyed. But the protection officer is adamant that Andrew came back. In fact, he was very rude to them, which is why they remember. So I don't think there's any doubt that he was in London that evening. No one remembers the pizza party, and in fact, I think a diary produced by the family suggests that he was getting a manicure that afternoon, rather than being at the pizza party. But you can get up to London from Woking quite quickly. You can go to both.
True. But you believe the palace tried to suppress the Epstein story when it threatened to break?
Absolutely, and they've tried that repeatedly. So there's a famous story, Amy Robach, who was a well-known journalist on ABC, had an interview with Virginia Giuffre talking about this many years before the story broke. The palace threatened ABC, saying that they would withhold access to particularly the Prince and Princess of Wales, and ABC backed down and killed the story. And there have been other instances of the palace basically downplaying the story, or, as I say, doing this horse trading to prevent the story coming out.
And of course, Fergie is also linked to Epstein, according to an ex-girlfriend of Prince Andrew's.
Well, I think there's plenty of evidence that she in fact knew Epstein as well as her husband, ex-husband. You know, the 18 phone numbers for her in the famous Black Book, only 16 for Andrew. She was flying in 1998 on the Lolita Express. Andrew was there only, we think, in 1999. There are legal depositions showing her at the place in Palm Beach and also in Manhattan throughout this period. And I have 3 different witnesses showing her actually staying in Epstein's flats after 2010, when she said she'd cut off all contact with him. But you're absolutely right. The line is that she only ever had £15,000 from Epstein. She's actually got the Daily Mail and others to correct reports saying that she got more. But I have, again, several sources, including this ex-girlfriend, saying that there were much larger sums. And of course, that would make sense.
And what sort of sums are we talking?
2 million was the sum I was given.
Wow. Okay, so that's a little bit different from 15,000. You also believe that Andrew lied about when he first met Epstein and about his December 2010 meeting 2 years after Epstein had pled guilty in a Florida court to soliciting prostitution from a minor.
His line was that he met Epstein in 1999. Well, he was going off to the island literally in February 2000. We know from a letter that Alistair Watson, his own private secretary, wrote to the Times that actually they met in 1990. And Steve Hoffenberg, who was the business associate of Epstein, says it was 1991. So, I mean, it certainly wasn't 1999. In terms of meeting him after he served a period, I mean, didn't really serve a correctional term, but 2008 to 2009, he basically was on day release from the prison. And Andrew continued to see him. He had the famous goodbye in December 2010, where he stayed for 5 days and had a dinner party thrown in his honour. But we now know from legal depositions in other cases that he was still in touch with him and having meetings in 2011. So everything, I mean, I have a whole section in the book where I go through all the lies he told in Newsnight.
And it's interesting, isn't it, because all of that information was out there for the dedicated researcher, and yet he still thought the Newsnight interview was a good idea. How did that come about?
Well, it's not just he thought it was a good idea, he thought it had gone extremely well.
Yeah.
The real story on the Newsnight interview is that actually it was Panorama who had done the work on this. They're a programme based in Northern Ireland. And they had an interview with Virginia Giuffre. They'd done an investigation, they'd interviewed a lot of people, and they were giving the palace a right of reply. That was the initial request that went in. At the same time, Newsnight were also trying to get an interview, but to talk about his time as special representative. And I think the palace decided that it was better to have what they thought might be a soft interview from Newsnight than to have this interview with Panorama. So Panorama were asked to basically, the decision was made in the BBC, and the BBC at times tried to suppress this Panorama investigation, I should say, again possibly with pressure from the palace. But Newsnight, I mean, various individuals there have made a career out of the Newsnight interview. But the fact is that they were handed the material from Panorama 72 hours before transmission. And the real hero of this story is a woman called Laura Burns, who was absolutely cut out of the script, has never really been mentioned until now. And I hope she now gets her proper due.
Wow. Well, before we move on, 2 quick-fire questions on Russia. Do the Russians actually have compromat on Andrew, and was Andrew seduced by a Russian spy?
Yes and yes.
Okay.
And not just...
I knew that was going to be the answer, but yeah.
Not just the Russians, the Libyans, the Middle East, people in Kazakhstan, you name it, they've all got compromat on Andrew. I mean, everyone has said that girls would be provided for him, and they would of course be filmed. And in terms of your second question, Absolutely. I mean, the woman seduced him in a hotel in Knightsbridge. She gave him a Mac computer which was bugged. She gave him £25,000 loan to help one of the children go to Switzerland. We've all got terribly focused on the Chinese spy. There were a lot of spies, I'm afraid, around Andrew and indeed Sarah Ferguson. And I think some of that story I try and bring out in the book, and I think there's other stuff which clearly I couldn't talk about, but I hope will eventually emerge.
What's that quote from the alleged Chinese spy, the useful idiot?
Yes, there were a lot of useful idiots around. He was a useful idiot to a lot of people. And he was, because he was both of them are very greedy and don't really do due diligence. They were very, very easy targets, soft-hanging fruit.
Oh my goodness. You discuss in the book an Argentine assassination plot on the private island of Mystique in the Caribbean. Is this Prince Andrew's real life or a James Bond plot?
No, the Argentinian junta had planned at the time of the Falklands War to assassinate him. He actually, after the Falklands, went off to Mystique with Cousteau. It was never implemented, but it was certainly planned, and there were also planned attacks on the dockyards in Portsmouth and on Ascension Island, which is a big naval base. So it was, certainly planned, and there have been several assassination threats against Andrew, including one by the IRA to get him on a golf course. And this is why his laxity about security, his reluctance to sign his girlfriends into the security gate at Buckingham Palace is so important. Because his life, was in threat. And I think, there are strong arguments that he should receive protection, even though he doesn't do royal duties, because I think probably there is a threat against his life. There's a woman called Irene Windsor who turned up at Royal Lodge.
Yes, I remember.
And managed, got the policeman to pay her taxi fare, and turned up and was allowed to wander around for half an hour in the gardens, saying she had a meeting with him because she was about to get engaged to him. And shortly after was sectioned. But there were lots of these episodes, and all these stories, like Togate, are all about security. Actually, that's the main thing. Do
you know much about whether or not Prince Andrew was more of a prized target in that sense, or was it just simply because he was more gettable than other royals? Or?
I don't know. There have been lots of attempts, clearly, on members of the royal family. I think people will try lots of people, but I think the threat against him was that he was a serving naval officer, so it's a bit like you've seen as a legitimate target, a bit like Mountbatten in '79. He's a senior member of the royal family. I think he was out and about. He was going to nightclubs. He was. Clearly on naval bases it was difficult, but he was out and about at China Whites and Tramp and elsewhere.
Not sweating.
Not sweating, absolutely. So, absolutely. He could easily, and of course now there will be people who kind of think they might be doing people a service. So, I'm always slightly amazed when I see pictures of him, riding on his horse in Windsor Great Park with just a groom. That there isn't more protection. Yeah,
well, it's interesting because I was just about to ask you, post Newsnight, post the Giuffre settlement, and obviously her tragic death by suicide, what is the reality of his day-to-day life now?
Well, his reality is he's slightly under house arrest. He lives in Royal Lodge. He clearly sees his family. He gets invited to shooting weekends, sees his friends. He's obsessed with watching videos of planes landing. He's obsessed with Boeing. Of course, we've had lots of scandals about the planes. When Fergie isn't there, he gets masseurs to come in and give him massages, in inverted commas, which he likes to have to the sound of country music. Good detail. So, he's there. There are stories that he continues to do some of his business activities. Now he's no longer a working royal, it's much easier. There are stories that he has been given a house in Abu Dhabi, that he goes to the Middle East. I've heard stories of him flying out from small airports in private jets and going abroad. He's playing golf. There are stories of him playing golf in Portugal. So it's not a bad life.
Yeah, it could be worse.
He's 65. He in effect lives the life of a retired gentleman.
What do you think, I know it's a difficult one to speculate on, but do you have any sense at all about what his reflections are on all of this? Does he have any regrets about his actual conduct, or is he more just furious that he was found out?
Well, I think his feeling is that he's sad that he's no longer a member of the royal family. He has the trappings of being a member of the royal family. That's what he loved. I don't get any sense, because I think he generally feels he's innocent of anything he did with Virginia Giuffre and others. I think he just feels that it's, he's been unfairly treated. And he's entitled to do some things he's doing. I think there are no very strict moral boundaries in his life. No one ever telling him what's right and wrong. So I don't think he does. And if we remember, he's still, though he's not allowed to use it, he's still Duke of York. I mean, the Duchess still uses her title long after she's been divorced. He's still a member of the Garter, yes, even though he doesn't go out on public occasions. And I think he's still a Vice Admiral. I think the Queen said just to keep him happy. So, he hasn't, actually paid the full price for what he's done. And
it's interesting because Prince Andrew has been, sidelined, been pushed out of the spotlight. But Sarah Ferguson, at least for the moment, seems to have been sort of like quietly welcomed back in. What do you think she's learned about her journey?
I think she's learned absolutely nothing. She just keeps repeating the same mistakes, and that she just distances herself, goes on Oprah, everyone forgives her and says what a kooky lady and how eccentric, and she's allowed to do all the stuff that she's done before. I think the feeling is that they need to keep her close. One of the themes of my book is her constant threats to spill the beans about Andrew and the royal family, and therefore it's much better to keep her on board than to have her outside the tent. I think that's part of it. People generously say she's friendly with Camilla, she's manipulated her, Charles doesn't want to have any more fights in the family, they think she's been very loyal to Andrew. But she sticks close to the royal family because that's her brand. Her whole business career has been based on being a member of the royal family. She'd be absolutely nothing without it. So she's going to stick in there. They can't, the late Queen and Prince Philip were very worried. They just couldn't. She was like a limpet. She wouldn't leave Andrew, living with him when, they felt he needed to break free and have new relationships. Yeah. She was back in there, and she's never really left his houses. Even though they've been divorced now, as you say, since 1996.
Do you think there's any way back for Andrew in terms of public-facing royal duties?
No, I think for two reasons. One is that he will never do what's required to basically say he's sorry, and I think the other thing is no one is prepared to forgive him what he's done.
When you say no one, you mean the public, or?
I think the public, and I think increasingly the palace are realising this. And I think once they see some of the material in the book, which I think it says about financial, not sexual scandal. Epstein is a side story to this. Right. I think they will be feeling that they have to distance him. He's going to have to be stuck in Balmoral in a tower and not allowed out.
Andrew, are you braced for the reaction to this book? What are you expecting?
Well, I'm expecting people to try and discredit it, to say I made it up, that I'm not a serious historian. With my last book, I found that people were briefing that there was nothing new in my book, which had a lot of new original research. I'm all set for the sycophantic historians and others who surround the royal family putting the boot in. But the fact is, Andrew and Fergie have been protected for far too long, and we need the full story to come out. And that's the role of biographers and journalists, to tell the truth.
And you'll just live without that Christmas card?
I have no interest in a Christmas card, or being knighted, or going to the palace, or anything else.
Well, I cannot wait to read the full book. Thank you so much for...
Pleasure.
An astonishing interview. I feel like I might need to go and have a little lie down after that. I don't know about you, but for our viewers and listeners at home, you will find a link below to Andrew's latest book entitled The Rise and Fall of the House of York. A reminder that you can sign up to the free royal newsletter by going to the on-screen link or by using your phone camera to scan the QR code that you'll find on screen now. If you love Palace Confidential, I'm sure you'll love the newsletter. Just time to say thanks again to my very special guest, Andrew Lownie, and to you for watching. Of course, we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.